Hello, Professor Zeeb here again, and welcome to another short lecture in psychology. We've been discussing emotions in the class, and so I want to focus on a particular emotion that we all are pretty comfortable with and are familiar with, and that is happiness. Let's go to our slides here and kind of discuss this. So happiness, one of those emotions that we like to focus on in research. It's definitely heavily researched, but at the same time, a little bit tricky to kind of get to exactly how to measure this. So let's continue here. Okay, so when it comes to happiness, like a lot of things in psychology, it's a little bit difficult to measure and study compared to some of our other emotions, for example, like sadness. Probably because there's not a lot of it. It doesn't appear to generate as many distinctive behaviors compared to some of our more negative emotions like anger, fear, and sadness. How do you know if someone's happy? I mean, obviously, a smile would be a great, way to kind of judge that. But at the same time, smiles can be faked, and that doesn't always mean someone's happy. Smiles can mean different things as well. So it's really hard to observe someone that's happy. It's really hard to get a guarantee that they're actually happy. So obviously, we would have to do a self-report or ask them how happy you are, or are you happy kind of thing. And so it gets a little bit tricky. So one of the areas we focus on in this realm is something called positive psychology, which is the study of features that enrich life. And so some of the ones that seem to come up in the studies would be things like hope, creativity, courage, spirituality are some of our common denominators. Responsibility would be another one that shows up consistently in the studies. However, the problem with this is that it kind of depends on the person. Happiness is a bit subjective, right? So, as the book kind of points out, what makes people happy, it may be better to ask what would make you happy, because we're all a little bit different in terms of what these factors are in our life. I mean, like I said, on average, these seem to show up, but for example, me personally, this is just an example, courage may be more important than, say, hope. It's not. I'm just saying that it could be, and therefore this is not a perfect measurement strategy to just focus on those particular factors. For example, when we look at other cultures, we find that these concepts of hope, creativity, etc., don't always show up in the same way. So it kind of depends on your background, things like personality, what you personally like as a person that may translate into happiness, for example. So because of that, psychologists often turn to this concept of subjective well-being. In fact, in the United States, most of our happiness research focuses on this. And so here, what we're doing is we're having the person self-evaluate their life as being pleasant, interesting, and satisfying. The point is, if the person reports that all three of these are present, my life is pleasant, my life is very interesting, it's definitely very satisfying, that would probably indicate that the person is happy. And so it would get around the problem that we have previously, where we have specific factors that kind of vary in the terms of people or in the realm of people. So this way, we just ask them with the self-report kind of thing, these questions, and then we kind of look for factors as common denominators that seem to correlate with that. Okay, so that leads us to some research. So the following are factors related to subjective well-being. Keep in mind, this is not exhaustive. Obviously, these are some of the factors that would show up, but certainly not every single factor. Okay, so let's get into these. So the first one is wealth. Now notice I put a little question mark there. This one is pretty tricky. It's not completely obvious. There's a lot of moving parts here that we kind of translate into connections between wealth and happiness. There are some studies showing that yes, people who are rich on average are probably happier than those who are not. But once again, it depends. It's not a very straightforward answer. I think it seems to matter that if you do not have wealth and then you suddenly get it, that would be a big change, and thus that could translate more into more subjective well-being. So for example, if you're poor and then you win the lottery, for example, yes, that could bring happiness because now your life has changed. You're able to buy things you never had. That being said, however, wealth of itself is not necessarily equal to happiness, because I'm pretty sure it's safe to say that not all rich people are happy. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. Yes, maybe their lives are more comfortable and they're able to buy things, but once again, that does not always translate into happiness. We know that people who win the lottery often report, yes, I'm happier than I was yesterday. But it also shows, the research also shows that it seems to kind of wane and wear off over time. So it's almost like once you become rich, you become accustomed to it or almost used to it. And, in a sense, you're numb to those feelings that you once had, and it sort of changes. So it's really hard to say that wealth, yes, makes people happy. It kind of depends on many different factors, also including what you do with your money. I mean, that seems to matter as well. So I'm going to point you to the textbook. The textbook gives a great discussion of this, so I really want you to read that. So it's a lot of interesting moving parts in play. Okay, so next we go to marital status, which also seems to show up in the studies. So what the studies are showing are that married people tend to be happier than those who are not. Now, I think we're kind of assuming here that the marriage is going great, because obviously if it's a horrible marriage, we wouldn't necessarily see that. That being said, we know that, a basic need of humans is to be loved and be accepted. And obviously that could be involved in a good marriage, right? For example, we know that college students who are dating someone and who are involved in someone seem to be happier than those who are alone. So once again, even though we're calling it marital status, it seems more to be connected to someone and having a relationship that is a healthy, strong, good relationship. Another factor that seems to show up with subjective well-being is having a long-term outlook in life. In other words, having goals. For example, college students often report that, yeah, I'm working towards something. I'm working towards bettering my life, that kind of thing. So we know that having a goal is often correlated to happiness, as we're finding out. Okay, having good health is another factor that also seems to connect to subjective well-being. I would say certainly as you get older as well, especially when you hit middle age and beyond, it seems that if you're healthy at the later stages of your life, you feel fortunate compared to people who are struggling with disease and have problems. This is another area we could look at in connection to wealth, because rich people who are not healthy probably are not as happy compared to rich people who are. So being healthy really seems to go hand in hand with happiness, especially as we get older, but certainly across the board, having good health is definitely good for happiness, as we found out. Studies are also showing that being religious is connected to happiness. Now, some of you may not agree with that. I personally, in my own opinion, 100% agree with that. And I think one of the reasons is because it's connected to a lot of the stuff we've already talked about. So for example, a lot of religions promote marriage. They promote having a long-term outlook, whether it's nirvana or heaven or whatever you're sort of after in your religion. Religions, you could argue, promote healthy lifestyles, which we've already made that point. So, whether you believe it or not, a lot of the studies are showing that religious people often are happier than those who are not. Once again, religion may support healthy attitudes and behaviors and things like that are connected to happiness, as we said. All right, this next one, I love this next one. It's helping people. We know that when you help someone, when you genuinely help someone and you don't have to, it gives us a boost. It makes us feel great. I love that one. I think this is one of the reasons why people become teachers. I can tell you personally, it's not for the income, okay? But certainly there's something beneficial to seeing a student succeed, giving them those skills, especially like an elementary school teacher where you're teaching them how to read and to do the basics of math, and you're seeing them grow as a person, and you know you've truly put in time to help that person, that really makes us feel good. So whether it's helping to feed the poor or helping a friend in need or whatever it is, we know that helping people seems to be very connected to happiness. So I really agree with that one. Performing those random acts of kindness seem to be critical to our emotional well-being. Okay, the next one we're going to look at is changing activities, meaning changing your life in some way. I think in this case, we're sort of assuming that it's a positive change for the person. For example, you finally quit smoking and you've been trying, or you finally sign up for college, which you've always wanted to do. You're joining some group that's beneficial to the society, or people at large. In other words, you're doing something that seems to be positive, that incorporates change. Now, change can create stress, obviously, when we're forced to change, but I think in this case, we're saying we're willing to do it, and it's something that's bringing, it's a benefit to other people, as we said before. That seems to be important to happiness. It seems to be connected to that. Okay, another interesting thing that comes up in the studies is your conversational style. We know that people who like to engage in conversation, now, once again, there are a lot of moving parts here, but in general, people who like to engage in conversation seem to be happier than those who are not. We all know people in our life who basically just do the basic chit chat, and that's all. That's it. And then there's people that will tell you everything. I think what we're saying here is that if you're willing to share a lot of things about your life, you're probably pretty happy about how they're going. Yes, people can complain about their life, and we know that negativity and depression and things like that can certainly factor in. But we've found that overall, if we kind of iron out all these differences, people who like to share conversation with people seem to be happy. In other words, it may be promoting connection to people. You're satisfied with your life and you want to share it with people, that kind of thing. So it seems to be once again correlated to subjective well-being. Okay, and then lastly, having happy friends. In other words, your social group, your social circle seems to be pretty important to how you experience emotions. I mean, for example, if you hang around a bunch of Debbie Downers, that you probably feed off that and are influenced by that. In other words, you all connect in this sort of depressive way, I guess. Whereas we find that people who have a very positive social group and circle of friends, if you would, seem to be happier on average. So even who you hang out with, who you sort of associate with, seems to connect to happiness and correlate with that. So I thought that was interesting. We also know that happier people tend to engage more in small talk, and that certainly could include other happy friends. So another connection to that previous point. Okay, so hopefully that makes it a little bit clearer in terms of what connects to happiness. Like I said, it's pretty complicated, a lot of moving parts. So make sure you read that section in the book, especially that discussion involving wealth and happiness, because like I said, it's pretty complicated. So please move on to the next step of the class, and we'll see you next time.